Now I am, like Chris said, my name is Aaron. I'm excited to be here at Venture Church this morning. I really enjoyed my time back in March, April. I don't know. It was back then, okay? It was a while back, too far back to remember the date. But it was cool. It was awesome. Y'all are super welcoming. Y'all have been super welcoming this morning. I just really enjoyed it. I'm excited to get down here to Wilmington, get working on this new church plan, on this project, on the Wilmington project. And I'm excited for y'all to be a part of it in whatever way you want to, and also work alongside y'all do. There's just so many awesome things going on here that God is already working on. So, that being said, today we're going to be diving into Psalm 63. So if you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and turn to Psalm 63. It's going to be a little bit before we actually get into it, but I want to give you time. I know finding books in the Bible can be difficult sometimes. So I want to give you plenty of time to get there while I yap a little bit. When I first got college age, the first college I went to was VMI, Virginia Military Institute. I got kicked out. All right, let's go ahead and start there. I got booted out because I made bad grades. Shocker, right? When you go to college, you got to do your homework and make good grades. That's how that works, or they're going to send you home. At the very end of the year, though, one of the things we had to do was we went up into the mountains. We were there for, it was like 3 days, 3 nights kind of thing. And essentially what they did was they said, all right, hey, pack your pack. Make sure you've got some snacks, and we're going to give your team a map, and good luck. We'll see you later on. We had little checkpoints throughout the whole thing. And one of the things I learned is that to be hydrated, you have to drink water. And I learned it the very hard way. So the last day of this hike, we're hiking up. We've got a few miles left, and we get to like where I can see the bus that's there to pick us up and take us back to the college. And I'm like, all right, dude, just a little bit further. We got this. And then everything starts to get a little fuzzy. I don't really remember all the details. I remember somebody taking my bag off of me. I remember somebody helping me onto the bus, and I remember getting handed a water and a banana. The next hour and a half, I couldn't tell you what happened. No clue. It turns out I was dehydrated because I learned my lesson of to stay hydrated, you have to drink water the hard way. I don't know if it was just the water or the banana or the combination of the two, but I got on the bus, I sat down, and I remember nothing. Nothing at all. Looking back, it's pretty terrifying. I maybe should have been at a doctor's office, but instead I was sitting on an old yellow school bus, hoping that I make it back to the college. Being thirsty or being dehydrated or any of those is not a very fun feeling. You feel like you're missing something because you are. You are missing something that you not only want, but that you need. There's something important, something sustaining that you don't have. Psalm 63 is about that very thing. It's about being thirsty, and it's not talking about in a physical way. Physical thirst is a very good picture for something God has placed in every human being. And every human being, whether you are religious, whether you are a Christian, whether you are not, wherever you are in life, this idea of thirsty and desiring something is built into us. God wired us to be thirsty to drive us towards Him. And so many of the things that we anxiously or frantically pursue in life, we do so because we are trying to satisfy that thirst. And it can be in a lot of ways that we chase after it. So we think, if I have a relationship with this person, or if this person loved me, or if I could marry this person, then my heart wouldn't be hungry anymore. I wouldn't be thirsty. Or if I could have this material item that is so cool, that is new, that is the best thing, well, then I'm not going to be thirsty anymore because I have what's important. Or if I could only achieve this level of success, or if I could have this much money in my bank account, I'm not going to be thirsty anymore. If I could have this power, if I could control all of these things in my life, if I had this, then I would not be thirsty anymore. And what we find out over time is that none of these things quench that thirst that we so deeply desire. Earth is never going to be your savior. Earth is never going to satisfy your thirst. And so what I want us to take away from today, if you only hear one sentence, if you only take one thing with you today, now when I say that, I'm not giving you permission to black out for the next hour and a half, because that's how long, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not giving you permission to just black out and not pay attention. All right, but I am giving you permission to not to remember every word I'm going to say because I'm not going to remember every word I say either. But I want you to remember this. The wilderness reveals what was true all along. God is enough. The wilderness reveals what was true all along. God is enough. And David does a very good job of painting this very picture of that in his own life. And so today, like I said, we're going to be diving into Psalm 63. Before we dive into that, I want to kind of explain to you where David is at, how he got here, what he's got going on in his life, just real quick. So David is in the wilderness. And so when you look at it, one of two things, he is either running from King Saul. It's not laid out in this chapter. He's either running from King Saul or he's running from Absalom. I think he's being hunted by Absalom at this time because it talks about the ark and the king. We're not going to dive into all that. That's not the big thing I want you to take away from this. What I want you to focus on and what we know for sure is that David is in the wilderness of Judah. The wilderness of Judah was not a very nice place. It was not a very comfortable place. It was not some peaceful campsite where we go now and we put our tents up and we're happy, right? It wasn't Roanoke Christian Camp where you get to go in there and have AC at night. This was the wilderness of the wilderness. It was dry. It was a rocky desert. There was very little water. There was intense heat. There was almost nothing there that could sustain life. It was the kind of place where you quickly realized how desperate you really were. Because what you needed, what would sustain you physically, was not really there. And so that's where David was when we pick up in Psalm 63. We're going to jump into the first couple of verses here real quick. So, verse 1, it says, "You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory." So again, David, like I've already said, he is in the wilderness. He is physically exhausted. He is surrounded by a dry, waterless land. But instead of focusing on his need for water, his mind goes to a greater need. He says, I thirst. He doesn't say I thirst for water. He says, I thirst for you. His body is thirsty, but his soul is even thirstier. And so this tells us something important, that our souls were created to need God just as our bodies were created to need water. Water isn't a luxury. Water is a necessity. Our bodies need it. It helps sustain us. David is saying, God, you're not just someone I enjoy. You are not just something I want. You are someone that I can't live without. And so what we see here with David is he has a thirsty soul. David has a thirsty soul. So how did David develop that kind of thirst? When we look at verse 2, it says, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. David longs for God because he's experienced God. He knows what it's like to be with God. He knows what it's like to be in his presence. He's remembering God's power. He's remembering God's glory. His past experiences with God fuel his present desire to be with him. And so the more clearly you see God, the more you will long for God. It's kind of like those old Lay's commercials back in the day. If you were born like after 2001, which over time I'm realizing there's more and more of those, and I spoke at a youth event Friday night, and I talked about my 2003 Toyota Corolla that I used to have, and I realized that all the students I was talking to that night, none of them were alive when that car was put together at the Toyota factory. Welcome to life. Anyway, we're going to move past that. But it's like those old Lay's commercials. If you are younger, you probably haven't really seen these. But does anybody remember like the catchphrase behind Lay's ads, the potato chips? It's, I bet what? I bet you can't eat just one, right? And what's the idea behind that? When you eat that first potato chip, you're going to what? You're going to want more. Why? It's honestly probably because they are 99% salt. And so you're going to drink water and then need salt. I don't know, but I do like Lay's potato chips. I think there's better options. I'm a Doritos guy. We don't have to argue about it, but you can be wrong if you want. All right. But the idea is, I bet you can't eat just one. The idea is like, if you have this one, The more you have, the more you are going to want it. Once you experience that kind of relationship with God, you will continue to desire more and more of his presence in your life. A thirsty soul isn't something you manufacture. It grows as you behold God's power, glory, and presence in your life. David has a thirsty soul. We're going to dive into verses 3 through 8 if you want to pick back up with me. It says this, it says, because your love is better than life, because your love is better than life. My lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night because you are my help. I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. So when we look at verses 1 and 2, David has a thirsty soul. Now when we look at verses 3 through 8, what I want us to see is that David has a satisfied soul. David has a thirsty soul, and then now we see that David has a satisfied soul. David's circumstances haven't changed. In this moment, his life hasn't changed. He is still stuck in the desert. He is still stuck in the wilderness. He is still on the run, but his soul has changed because his focus is not on his circumstance, but his focus is on God. And he says, because your love is better than life. Better than life? Really? I'm stuck in the desert. I don't have food. I don't have water. I am on the run. If he is saying, if I lose my comfort, if I lose my throne, if I lose my freedom, even if I lose my life, I still haven't lost what matters most. Because your love is better than life. And that is an incredible statement. David isn't saying life isn't good. He's saying God's love is better than everything that we fight to naturally preserve our life. And that's why he praises. Worship is the natural response when we truly value a relationship with God. A satisfied soul values God more than his gifts. And then he goes on and he says, I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. David goes back to another physical picture. Just as a great meal satisfies the body, God's presence satisfies the soul. And notice where this happens. He says, on my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. His satisfaction isn't found in the changing of his circumstances, but in remembering simply who God is. The soul is fed by remembering God, and David ends with these three images. God is my help. I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, and your right hand upholds me. David holds on to God, but ultimately, David is also recognizing that God is holding on to him. God is with him. God has never left him. God has stayed by his side, and that's where David's confidence comes from. That's why his soul is satisfied. Think about when you're on vacation, right? You get excited, right? You are going to, I don't know where people at the beach go to vacation. How does that work? Do y'all go to the mountains? Do y'all do a staycation and just go to the beach every day? I don't know. Doesn't matter. But when you are on vacation, you get pumped, right? You're like, I don't have to work for the week. I do still have to take care of my kids, I guess, but like, that's fine. I don't have to do my 9 to 5, but I get to go eat nice food every day. I get to hang out. I get to relax. If I just want to sit in front of the TV, I can do that. If I want to go on a hike, if I want to get on the beach, it's great, right? Because I am here. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to have fun. It's going to be relaxing, or it should be. But I know for me, it comes that point during every vacation, during every one of those trips, it gets to the point where, man, I just want to be at my own house, and I want to be in my own bed, because, dude, there is no bed that sleeps like your own bed, right? Am I wrong? If you think I'm wrong, you're wrong, okay? There is no bed that sleeps like your own bed. It's where you want to be. And that's David. The wilderness hasn't changed. He hasn't escaped, but his heart finds rest because God's presence is home. Even though he is somewhere else, his body remembers where home is. And we often think that we need to change, what we need is a change in circumstance, when what we really need is our soul really needs God's presence. A satisfied soul rests because it knows that God is holding on to it. So we have a thirsty soul, we have a satisfied soul, and now we're going to jump into the last couple of verses here in chapter 63, verses 9 through 11. It says this, it says, "Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the deepest depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for the jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced." David ends the psalm by looking at the very thing that drove him into the wilderness, his enemies. What's interesting is, once again, his circumstances still haven't changed. He's still in the desert. He's still surrounded by dry land. There isn't abundant food. There isn't a bunch of water. Nothing has changed. His enemies are still out there, yet his confidence is completely different. And so what we see from David in these verses is a rejoicing soul. We see a rejoicing soul. David doesn't take matters into his own hands. Instead, he leaves his enemies in God's hands. He is confident that God will deal with the evil in his way and in his time. A secure soul doesn't need revenge because it trusts in God's justice. If you look back, he says, "But the king will rejoice in God." David's confidence isn't in his army. It isn't in his abilities or even in his escape plan. David's very good at escaping. He did it a lot throughout his story. His confidence doesn't come from that. His confidence is in God. The psalm begins with David seeking God and ends with David rejoicing in God. His circumstances may be uncertain, but God is not uncertain. All right, imagine maybe as you were a kid, or maybe you were a parent and you have kids, and as every kid has at some point in their life, there is a monster under the bed. I've been there. I had a witch that lived in my closet when I was a little kid, and it terrified me. Okay, I could not, if my closet was open, not only could I not go to sleep, I couldn't get up to go shut the door. Somebody else had to come in there and do it, or I was staying up all night long. But when you think about it, you think about those situations, you think about those moments, they can't sleep because there's something there that's going to get them. That is, until mom or until dad comes into the room and they console them and they shut the closet door, or maybe they open the closet and like drop kick just blankly into the closet, or like swing a bat under the, I don't know. I don't have kids, so I haven't had to deal with it. I think that'd be really cool though, actually. Instead of saying, "Don't worry, I had a talk with them, it was really cool," you just open the closet and just like Chuck Norris kick straight into an empty closet. And don't worry, I took care of it. And they're like, "Yeah, right." Anyway, but you go in there, you do the thing, and then all of a sudden, once you take care of them, once you give them that comfort, once you let them know that, hey, I have taken care of the problem, because they know it was handled by their parent, by the one that has always been there for them, by the one that protects them, because they know what you can do. They have seen it their whole life. They have all the confidence in you to handle that situation. Now they can go to sleep. And that's how David feels. He knows that regardless of his circumstance and regardless of the things that may bring him fear, fear for his life, he has a Father that is with him. A secure soul can rejoice today because it trusts God with tomorrow. We have a thirsty soul, we have a satisfied soul, and then we have a rejoicing soul. And so what we learn overall when we look at David's story here in Psalm 63 is what we talked about at the very beginning. The wilderness reveals what was true all along. God is enough. And so the psalm, when we read Psalm 63, when we look at David's story, when we look at what he wrote here, the psalm is not just describing to us David's story. It's not just telling us what he had going on in his heart and what he had going on in his mind. This psalm is inviting us into the same type of relationship with God that David shows us in Psalm 63. And so I want to just point out two things that we can take from this and we can put in our own lives so that every day when we get up, when we go throughout our day, we can make sure that we are living a life with a thirsty soul that finds satisfaction and rejoicing in God. Okay, so the first thing that I want us to see here is that we need to seek God before we seek escape. Seek God before we seek escape. There's nothing wrong with praying for God to change your circumstances, all right? That's not what I want you to take from this. There's nothing wrong with that. David certainly wanted deliverance from his situation. He certainly wanted deliverance from his circumstances. But before he prayed for a different wilderness, he pursued a deeper relationship with God. His greatest longing wasn't simply for a way out. It was for the one who was with him in the wilderness. We look back at Psalm 63:1. It says this. It says, God, you are my God. I eagerly seek you. I thirst for you. Before David ever mentions his circumstances and the tough things that are going on in his life, he says, God, I am seeking you. I long for you. I desire to be with you. I thirst for you. Before he looks for a change in circumstance, he looks to God. And then I want to read another verse to y'all. Jeremiah chapter 2, verses 11 through 14, it says this. It says, has a nation ever changed its gods? Yet they are not gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glorious God for worthless idols. Be appalled at this, you heavens, and you shudder with great horror, declares the Lord. My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. So we look at this, Scripture is saying, hey, there are two problems, there are two issues with what is going on here. It says, my people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, they have forgot about me, they have ignored God, they have ignored the one who has always been there, who has always guided them, who has always protected them, who has always led them to where they need to be. And instead of chasing after the only thing that quenches the thirst of our life, that quenches that thirst in our soul, it says they dug their own cisterns. Right? Basically, that means they built these systems to where they could catch rainwater that was no good for them, basically. They would break, they would shatter, they would lose everything in them. Instead of trusting in the spring of living water, the water that was actually useful, the water that could actually help them, the water they could actually drink, the water that would actually sustain them, they trusted the water that they could gather on their own. David's first instinct wasn't to escape the wilderness, it was to pursue God in the wilderness. Instead of trusting his own instincts and trusting his own plan, he instead pursues God in the wilderness. Oftentimes, our response to hardship reveals what we think is going to satisfy us, reveals what we think is going to get us through this moment. When life gets hard, my question is, where do you run? Do you seek comfort? Do you seek entertainment? Is it success that you're chasing? Because that's going to satisfy me. That's going to get me through this. Is it other people? Because they can make you feel better. They can help you escape what you're dealing with mentally. Is it control? If I can just get a handle on everything, then it's all going to be okay. David doesn't seek escape. David says, God, I seek you. Before you ask God to change your circumstances, ask him to change your heart. Who here, when you leave today and you go start your car, your check engine light is going to be on? I'm going to go ahead and throw my hand up so that anybody else is not going to be embarrassed. My check engine light is going to be on. I don't remember a time in the last 15 years where I started one of my vehicles, the 2003 Toyota Corolla that I was talking about and the Tacoma that I have now. I can't remember the time in the last 15 years where I didn't have a check engine light on. When it comes to ignoring that check engine light or just forgetting that it's there, I'm the president of the club. I am the best of the best. I am perfectly trained in this. But I think a lot of us, when that check engine light comes on, if It's normal for you. You are very good at ignoring your light. And we often treat our circumstances like a check engine light. We try to cover it up. Maybe you put a piece of tape on it, or maybe you just try to ignore it altogether. The thing is, the light isn't the problem. It's pointing to something bigger. It's pointing to a bigger issue. Sometimes our trials are like that. We spend all of our energy trying to turn the light off or ignore it or cover it up instead of letting God deal with what's underneath. Don't just ask God to remove the symptom. Ask him to transform your heart. Now, how can I do that? Here's a few ways that I think you can start to implement that concept in your life. One, when you wake up in the morning, before you grab your phone when you're about to lay down or when you're waking up or whatever it may be, our first instinct a lot of times is to grab that thing, right? We've been trained to do it. Instead of that, spend a few minutes with God. Whether it's cracking open a Bible, whether it's just talking with him, whether it's just meditating, whatever it is, instead of grabbing your phone, spend a few minutes with God. Or before you vent to everyone else, maybe communicate what you've got going on with God. Or before you look for relief, ask God, what do you want me to learn in this season that I'm dealing with right now? Or instead of asking, how do I get out of this, ask, how do I know God better through this? This week, every time you're tempted to ask and say, hey, God, get me out, I encourage you to first stop and pray and say, God, help me find you in this moment. Seek God before you seek escape. Second thing I want us to take away from this is that we need to learn to rejoice in the wilderness. Rejoice in the wilderness. There are two ideas that I kind of want to blurt out to you real quick. One is that when we find ourselves in the presence of God, it should bring us joy. When we find ourselves in the presence of God, it should naturally create this response of rejoicing in our lives. The second thing is that we're humans. The reality is that we are people, and sometimes that doesn't happen. Maybe we don't realize we're in the presence. Maybe we ignore the presence. Maybe we are so focused on our problems that we ignore his presence, whatever it is. And so sometimes we have to remind ourselves and tell ourselves that we should be joyful. Because even in those moments, we can find something to worship. We can find something to praise. We can find a reason to rejoice. Because no matter the circumstance, we live in the presence of God. And so we sometimes have to discipline ourselves to rejoice. Sometimes, unfortunately, rejoicing isn't spontaneous. Sometimes rejoicing is a decision. And I think that's kind of what David is dealing with here. He very easily could have ignored it, and he could have said, I'm just going to sit here and whine and groan and complain, and then later on when I'm happy, I'll thank God for it. But he makes a decision in this moment that even though I am dealing with this wilderness, even though I'm dealing with possibly the loss of my life, I am going to rejoice in God. He reminds himself who God is. Habakkuk chapter 3, verses 17 and 18 say this. It says, though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stall, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. Joy isn't pretending that life is easy. It's declaring that even when it isn't easy, God is still good. Don't wait for your circumstances to change before you worship. I want everyone to imagine their favorite places to eat. Maybe it's PT's. Big fan. Good job, Wilmington. You did really good on that one. Island, another really good one. Another one on my list, just in the last couple weeks, shout out Chris, Britt's Donuts. Let me tell you, they're opening a new location in South Carolina. Good for Britt's, okay? I love it, right? I love those donuts. It was really good. I remember when I used to live in Plymouth, we went to this place all the time called Hardison's Barbecue. And when I say all the time, I mean weekly. If they didn't see us for a week and we walked into the counter to order food, there was a little bit of joy in their face and a little bit of distraught, where have y'all been? I was here 7 days ago. I don't know what to tell you. It hasn't been that long. But we went there all the time. And we would order our food, and we'd sit down, wait for them to bring it out. And I remember every time they would bring the food out, I'd see maybe it was my barbecue sandwich or my burger or my barbecue plate or my ribs. I could go on, okay? All of it was so good. And they would bring it to the table, and they would set my plate down, and I would just smile, and I'd go, thank you so much. I haven't touched my food yet. I haven't really got a good smell of my food yet. And I would say that not because I was happy to see food, but because I knew the quality of the food I was getting. Why? Because I've eaten there before. I trusted the way that this food was made. I knew who was making it. I knew what I was getting. David praises God before the rescue arrives because he knows God's character. His praise isn't based on today's circumstances, but God's past faithfulness. And so how can I rejoice in the wilderness? Maybe start your prayers with praise instead of just a, hey, God, can you give me this list? It's very easy to get into that. Maybe keep a journal of ways that you've seen God's faithfulness so that you have something to remember when life gets hard. Or when anxiety starts to take over, intentionally thank God for 3 things that he's already done for you in your life or even in that day. Remember that God is good. Or maybe turn on worship music instead of sitting in your worry. I do that one a lot. When I'm in the truck and I start driving, my brain, dude, I don't know what it is about hitting the road, but it turns. And sometimes I'm like, all right, I need to think about these things, but right now I need a break. Let me turn on some worship music and just sing louder than my thoughts can think. And sometimes that's helpful, but maybe turn on worship music instead of just sitting in your worry. The emphasis isn't that pretending everything is okay. It's choosing to focus on God's character and who he is. Every day this week, take 5 minutes to thank God for who he is, not just for what he's done. And that echoes David's words that we read earlier, because your love is better than life. He's praising God before anything has changed. We need to remember to rejoice in the wilderness. When we read Psalm 63 and we get to the end, we realize that David never leaves the wilderness in Psalm 63. The wilderness doesn't change in this moment. His circumstance doesn't change. His enemies don't disappear. Nothing improves except for David. He begins thirsty, he becomes satisfied, and he ends rejoicing. Why? Because he discovers that God's presence is enough. And we need to learn to have that same kind of attitude in our lives and in our heart. To seek God before we seek escape and to rejoice in the wilderness. And when you do that, your relationship with God and your outlook on the things that you face in life will become so much different. Your entire outlook on what you're dealing with in life will become so much different when we realize that even in the difficult moments of our life, even in the hard circumstances that we face on a daily basis, God's presence has never left us. And we need to remember who he is. Remember that the wilderness reveals what was true all along. God is enough. Let's pray.